Welcome back to the Last Lap podcast. Now, before we get into it, thank you all for entering the competition to win a copy of F122 last weekend. Matthew Cairns, you're the winner, mate. Well done. If you want to win, we've got one more copy to give away. Make sure you drop a 5-star rating on your favourite podcast platform and let us know. Send us a print screen, Twitter, Instagram, wherever. Now let's crack on with the chat. All right, you lot, don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're at it, give us a 5-star rating. Trust me, it really does help us out. We've just watched the US Grand Prix at COTA. Not a bad race, but here, me, Aldas and JB are going to talk all about, not just, we're going to touch on the race, but we're also going to talk about some other topics surrounding F1, because there's always stuff to talk about.
Especially now, plenty of juicy topics to get into.
Exactly. First of all, boys, I mean, how was the stream? Did you enjoy it?
That was a lot of fun. I had a great time. I've not been in anything this, like I was just saying, all of my recording is done either in my bedroom or my office, as I now call it, or outside with cars. So being in a nice big studio, I feel like I'm a TV host.
That's it.
I know. I've done a few kind of similar things in the past, but this was a lot of fun. Also, really good when the race is like a bit of a banger as well, and there's a bit of intrigue. You don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot, and it's not over.
It's not over. It is not over. But if you didn't watch the live stream, then go check it out. And you might be watching this on the Last Lap YouTube channel. So if you are, then don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that. Good. Again, do all that early doors. Then we don't have to remind you later. So, lads, I guess the first talking point I want to kind of address, specific to this race, I guess, is because there's a few performances we saw kind of K-Mag getting to the points, Vettel kind of maybe getting clearly getting let down a bit by Aston Martin, a good car, but ultimately, where do we think Mercedes are going to be next year? What do we think from the trajectory? Because the cars are very much similar, 15 mil extra ride height, but other than that, they're pretty much the same. It's felt like a stronger end to the season for Mercedes. Do we think this stands them in good stead for next year?
I think it all depends on how much they learn from the problems that they had. I don't think it's just a case of, the no sidepod concept, or maybe they should just bolt on the Red Bull side pods. I think it's all about learning the fundamental problem of where it went wrong. And to be fair, they have been super tight-lipped on, like, even Toto Wolff, and I was even listening to a podcast with Mike Elliott, who's the actual, the guy who's designing the car now. And they're still very tight-lipped on what they're doing for next year. They really don't want to kind of give their cards away. I'm not sure. I think they do know what their car concept is going to be now for sure, but I don't think they're telling anyone.
Have they solved the problem that they had earlier this year, or have they found a temporary solution? That's like the key thing for me. Like, if they've solved the problem, they know what it was, and now they can go on from there. Then maybe they might have somewhere to go next year. If what we're seeing at the moment is a temporary solution to an existing problem, then I'd be more scared about next year.
Because the thing is that, I mean, I've waxed lyrical about, Mercedes' consistency and the fact that they're so close to Ferrari, given how much better the Ferrari car's been over the course of the year, how many poles Charles got, how many times they have won races. But even with that, the Mercedes still hasn't found a way to win. So that concerns me, because, I mean, that gap, half a second is still too much, really. Like, half a second in qualifying, that's what we kind of saw at COTA. That's still too much to really win a race without fortune falling in your favor, right? Surely.
Yeah.
I mean, we just saw an 11-second pit stop for Red Bull, and ultimately Max was still able to catch up. I do think that there are some good things about this car that I've actually been kind of in the Mercedes DNA for a while. I mean, like the tire wear, that's very good. And even back to the 2020 car, the reason why they invented DAS is because they had tire warm-up issues. So there's a weird kind of DNA, even though it's a different kind of car fundamentally. There's still kind of something about Mercedes about this car. The tire wear is good, the reliability is good. So it's not all bad, and they're still challenging, for podium. So that it's not like they've dropped off massively. But I think it's just that core performance. I mean, again, half a second away from, if you've got one of the greatest qualifiers of all time, Lewis Hamilton. There, you've got George Russell, who's clearly in the right car, can challenge for wins. We saw that in Sakir, even in his one little stint in 2020. And he has kind of shown also a little bit of, like, especially at the beginning of the season, consistency as well. So you've got two drivers. I think you've got a great team. And that's the difference, I think, between Mercedes and Ferrari, where I think if you put Lewis in that Ferrari and also the Mercedes team, if you give them that car, I think they could have scored a bit more points. So there's still plenty of positives for them to take away, but it's all about, have they found that fundamental issue of why their car is not working, why they don't produce the downforce?
That's a fair point you make, though, because like I actually think at the same time, like if anyone's going to make it work next year and then going into the following years, it's that team. Like Toto, Lewis, George as well have proven that they can do this. Like George obviously working hard with Williams to get them from a place where they were scoring no points consistently to actually be able to score points relatively, like not consistently, but enough in that car.
We saw that podium. Exactly. I don't care about how legit it was. We saw that podium last year in Spa.
If anyone can do it and develop the car and get in the right place, they can. They're up against Red Bull, who obviously also have one of the best designers of all time. So
yeah,
just that team in general, like the Red Bull team is just operating at such a high level. I know obviously the pit stop is not looking good now, but across the board, their pit stops are A1. Max Verstappen is in his absolute prime, and just the strategy as well. And Schmidt as well, like smashing.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like even the best teams sometimes, I think a lot of the, I actually think when you look back at it, I think the fact that Lewis was driving at such an incredible level for those kind of 8 years where they won 8 constructors, I think that did, Mercedes could make mistakes and it wasn't the end of the world because they still had the driver in the car to turn it around. But I guess onto Lewis, there was a stage I feel like if Lewis had won that 2021 world title, I wouldn't have been remotely surprised if he'd have hung his gloves up then. What do we think now that obviously he's gone through this season where their car is in that kind of uncanny valley between the top and the top and the top of the midfield? There's been talk of, like Toto said, we could get 4 or 5 more years out of him. I don't know. I feel like this battle was maybe, and maybe it's unfair to think that Lewis had lost some of that drive. But when he was winning so consistently, I think being chucked back into the midfield, I can't help but feel this is like...
It's a mental reset.
Yeah, at another level.
Yeah, and a new challenge.
And also, I mean, again, like people like Fernando Alonso, he's been in the midfield for a while now. He had that kind of shock when he went to McLaren. That's why he was so vocal, in 2015. For Lewis and Toto, this was mentally tough. You go 8 years, and for Lewis, actually, even more than 8 years, since 2007, since he came into Formula One, he's been always kind of, challenging for wins every single season. Mentally, that is very difficult to readjust yourself. And I do think that at the beginning of the season, there was a bit of a just mental shock for Lewis to kind of like almost adapt to his situation right now. But once he kind of got it under control, once he knew that, what the future was as well, what they're aiming for, I think he's almost had like a new motivation. And we just saw it, don't get me wrong, this has not been a perfect season. There were a few mistakes, I think, in Spa up against Fernando, that wasn't a great one. We saw obviously in Singapore as well, but I think we saw it in that race right there. Does that look like a guy who is not motivated to win? Absolutely not.
He also looks so happy. I don't want to put emotions into his brain, but he looks really happy at the end of races. Like even after that one coming in P2, he was smiling.
Lewis doesn't hide his emotions, does he?
Yeah,
he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bro was happy. Like he looks like he's actually having a good time dealing with a new challenge. Like I'm not saying he's any less happy or more happy than he was before. Winning loads of titles has got to be fun. But at the start of the season, it felt like he was struggling. And now it feels like he's actually like, oh no, I've got a challenge. We're going to make it happen. He's out there on track, putting it out there. So fair play to him. Today, if he'd won, it wouldn't have been on him. That would have been on Red Bull screwing up the pit stop.
Yeah, of course.
But becoming P2 was on him today.
Yeah, and that's what Mercedes have consistently done this year. They've always been there to capitalise as much as they can. I mean, again, like Verstappen, it looked good at one stage. We don't know how much tyres are being managed, and he ended up getting the move done quite comfortably in the end. But I think that this shows why Lewis is so good, because look, if that goes slightly different, if that pit stop from Red Bull's like an Aston Martin pit stop that was 16 seconds instead of 11, Lewis wins the race. Like there's a reason he's won a race in every single year he's competed in all these different, like I know people say, oh, but he's only raced for like McLaren and Mercedes, but these cars have been like the McLaren that he was racing in 2007, 2008 was very different to the McLaren he was racing in 2011, 2012, and he still managed to drag wins out of it. Like and
there was also some rough years as well. I mean, 2009 actually was a rough year where it was kind of similar to this year in terms of the readjustment, and the car did get better, and he managed to win a race. So it's not all been plain sailing, but...
Isn't he also only 3 points away from being like a 10-time world champion? It's something ridiculous. Yeah. Like the stats are crazy. Like he missed out on a few championships by such a small amount.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he's 2007. Yeah. Well, that's 2007, 2021 straight away.
Yeah, 2021, and then
2016 as well.
Yeah,
and I think even in 2010 he was like a massive out. He was like 24 points away from going into Abu Dhabi. So that was a massive long shot. But yeah, he's been around. But I think what it's reaffirmed. I haven't heard Lewis kind of come out and say that he will be in Formula One for the next 5 years. Toto says that he's had that conversation, but in terms of forget what anyone is saying, the performance I saw is someone who is still absolutely at the top of his game, someone who in the right car, absolutely still challenging for a world championship, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I think as well, like when you look at well, I know you did a video recently on Michael Schumacher and how like his return, it didn't quite go, I think, as planned. And fair enough, his expectations were to jump in and, he was jumping into essentially the brawn. But I think keeping that level of consistency going for so long, like when do you think we'll see the end for Lewis? And I guess how do Mercedes... Because, he's not going to be in that car forever. And I think we can have these conversations around drivers like Alonso. I mean, Alonso feels like he can go on forever. But eventually, like, I think for Mercedes, there has to be some kind of contingency as to, what do you think the future holds for Mercedes? Because I was talking recently, like, about Lando Norris, for example. Like, does he maybe regret not entertaining a Red Bull move that he had? He confirmed he had talks with Red Bull. So, like, JB, do you think that... What do you think the future holds for it, both in terms of when Lewis does eventually retire and then who replaces him alongside Russell?
So my assumption is that George is getting one of the best learning experiences of his life right now. He's getting to go with a 7-time world champion who was almost an 8, and like, as we spoke, potentially more if he had a few things go a different way. He's learning from him. He's learning from Toto Wolff, who's managed to run a team at the top for such a long time as well. And he's learning from a team around that as well that has done 8 constructors titles in a row, obviously not this season. That is an incredible learning experience and a great opportunity. I'm not sure anyone else will get that opportunity other than George Russell. So in my head, George Russell becomes obviously the number 1 driver. Who drives with him is a tough question. There's questions around whether it's someone from the Mercedes ecosystem. So I don't think Ocon is probably in the running for that, but maybe Nick de Vries if he's the right guy for it at the time.
Vesti's the best kind of F2 junior who's part of Mercedes.
Yes, I think that George is going to be the experienced driver at some point when Lewis goes. And so then you're going to want to bring in someone junior in my head to then keep the legacy going almost. Like Lewis passes the baton to George passes it to probably F2 driver, I guess. Yeah.
But also I think Toto's learned from the Nico. I mean, it's been a pretty good relationship so far between, Lewis and George and
because
Mercedes.
They're not fighting for wins.
Yeah. Exactly. We still don't know what that's going to be like for a title. Whole different dynamic.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
George is already even though he's having a bit of a, rough patch, I suppose you could say, he still had an amazing season so far at Mercedes. Like, he's still, obviously points don't tell the full story, but he's had a great, all those podiums. He's still ahead of Lewis in the championship. So he has been very consistent. Again, a bit of a rough patch at the moment. I think for Mercedes and Toto, when Lewis does decide to hang up his helmet, which we don't even know when it's going to be, Lewis could still go on for another 5 years. I think it'll be an interesting decision whether he wants a number 2, maybe someone from the midfield. Again, maybe, de Vries. If de Vries doing a good job, but doesn't quite look like a superstar, maybe he could be like a little Valtteri 2.0. Because if George Russell is absolutely the number 1, the guy who will take the throne after Lewis leaves, do you want another kind of superstar in there, or do you want a Valtteri 2.0?
See, this is what I think Red Bull want to do with de Vries. That's why I think Red Bull got him in an AlphaTauri, because I think long term they want de Vries to partner Verstappen. That's what when Perez eventually moves on.
I think it's weird with Helmut Marko and the whole Red Bull system, because they still do, by the way, on their books, all of these juniors, and they're not taking any of them. Like Lawson, I think could do a pretty decent job, but clearly thought he was not good enough to be in Formula One. So I think the whole Red Bull situation, Red Bull are letting it play out because they don't want to rush into decisions. Sergio Perez is doing a great job at the moment. I feel like, obviously, maybe not to challenge for the world title. We'd love to see Perez be able to, push Verstappen all the way, take it to Abu Dhabi. But for what they want, a good kind of harmonious relationship, I think Perez is doing just enough now. And to be fair, he's been given these kind of like 1-year contracts. Again, the Valtteri special, just like Valtteri was a Mercedes. So, it all depends on Perez, how long he can stay this close to Max, to where if the car is good enough and Max keeps winning, you don't need to change something that's broke.
I'd keep him in there.
That's it. Well, no, I guess the one thing, it kind of concerned me, but thinking as of late, so going into next year, say Mercedes do have a race-winning car. Again, like Nico, Lewis back in the day, like having 2, it feels like George isn't prepared to be like the beta. If you got alpha beta, like George wants, like we saw it in Zandvoort where George was like getting a bit, feisty.
My favorite bit was actually after the race, someone in the interview actually asked him, if the team left you out for you to be a rear gunner, to Lewis on old tyres, would you have accepted that? And you could see in the back of his mind, he was like, I'm not sure why I want to be doing that, on old tyres. So he's already got that little bit of selfishness in him, which is exactly what a world champion does have.
I think it's all about the mentality. Why did Rosberg leave? Like, there's been loads of talk around how it was for him a really stressful year.
It was too intense.
It was super intense. Like Lewis has been there, done that now. And so if you had to put your money on one of the two of them coming out into the season, Like, I know where money's going.
Yeah.
It's the guy who's done it and been there and done it.
Yeah.
And if George can show the mental fortitude to beat Lewis over the course of a season in a team that probably favours Lewis because he's been there for so long, then fair play to him.
Because I think there's a way of looking at this season that I don't know if I come to this conclusion, but for sure, part of me is thinking, actually, Lewis has been quite clear of George because start of the year, it makes sense. Lewis was he was the kind of test mule for more experimental setups with this car because they've
And we should say
aggressive.
we don't know to what extent. Of course.
We don't know to what extent, but the fact that Mercedes have said, "Oh, we did that at the start of the year. We're not doing that anymore." And it's 5-0 in qualifying to Lewis in the last 5 races. I think the last 5 races
as well sometimes.
Yeah. Does that concern you, especially you as a Russell fan? You know, does that concern you? Because actually, the points are telling one story, but I don't know. I actually think Lewis has very much got not even the edge over George. I think he's been quite comfortably on top of him these last few races.
Exactly. I think for George also, it's not the perfect scenario to come into a team where the car is struggling straight away. But he's going to develop, throughout that team. I think he's already kind of a driver who potentially could challenge for a world title. If you put him in the 2021 Merc, if you put him in Valtteri's seat last year, I'm not saying he wins the title, even beats Lewis, but he's definitely taking it to at least the last.
Well, we saw
races.
him secure, didn't we?
Exactly. So I think for George, it's just about kind of keeping calm at the moment, learning as much as he can. But I do think he has world championship potential. Now, there has been some incidents again, even in this race, little things creeping in, locking up and going into science, but there is something about Russell that I think he has that selfishness in him. Again, everything's calm now. The car's not challenging for titles. He's got that dog in him. I mean, we're going to see when he really gets... I think a championship level car asks a completely different question of you. And that's what we saw with Valtteri. Valtteri was amazing at Williams. People forget how good and how highly rated he was. People did think, there was questions, could this guy be a world champion? And then when he got into that race-winning car, he had the qualifying pace. He was always up there with Lewis in terms of quali, but in the races, he was never quite there.
Place, yeah.
Exactly. Now, and that's the question. That's the only thing that we need to ask of Russell. Put him back in a championship-winning car with all of that pressure. I mean, the pressure in 2021, from the team principals to the drivers to everyone at the team, how is Russell going to handle that? Because I think he's got the speed, he's got the consistency, but how is he going to handle that pressure across the season?
Do you reckon, JB? Do you reckon he's got the minerals?
I think I've always thought that he's a future world champion. When that happens, I'm not sure. When it comes to Lewis and him debate, you also got to think about context. You got Lewis, who's been in a race-winning, championship-winning car year in, year out for 8 years. And you've got George who's coming from one of the slower cars on the grid into a car that is, when you say struggling, yeah, it's struggling, but not compared to his cars. So his cars were a
very different team as well in terms of the amount of people at Williams and Mercedes.
He knows the people though. He has dinner with them, dudes. He knows who he's coming into. I think that yes, George has the minerals to be a world champion one day. Whether he does it alongside Lewis Hamilton is a completely different.
And also up against Verstappen and Leclerc, because I don't know, for me, and if Piastri proves to be as good as his junior career suggested as well, he had a very similar junior career coming up. Lando as well. We're not short of as much as this sport isn't as big a meritocracy as I think we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
I think we're in a good place driver-wise. But talking to drivers, because we have got to get onto this, Mr. Logan Sargeant.
Oh yeah, big news there. I mean, it was kind of a bit of a bombshell. Joska Peter, kind of put into that.
He wasn't even meant to be in that interview.
He was just chilling, yeah, and obviously he revealed it straight away. I was on a call as well. Wasn't even asked too much, I don't think.
No, he wanted to say it.
I quite like what he's done. That. He said that Logan Sargeant will be their 2023 driver if he secures the super license points. I actually really like that because he's put pressure on Logan. And I quite like that. Formula 2, the weird thing is, Felipe Drugovich was fighting for a title this year, but that final race has a Formula 1 drive on the line for Logan Sargeant, and so he needs to deliver the points in terms of the super license, but also, on the track as well. And I really like the way they've gone about it because if he doesn't get the super license points, there will still be options for Williams. There will always be options for a Formula 1 drive.
Ricciardo in the seat.
Exactly. I don't know if Ricciardo would be up for that, but there'll always be options. But I like putting that pressure on a young driver. You got to deliver. Do you want a Formula 1 drive? It's in in the palm of your hands and deliver, and you get it.
Have you seen much of him, JB? What do you make of what you've seen of Logan?
He's rapid, and the key thing, I think I said it before, he's American. That's huge for the sport to get an American in there. When we've got 3 American Grand Prix next year, I think it's good to have him involved. As long as he can can do a better job than Latifi in the car, because it looks to me like the Williams is a bad car. It looks horrible to drive. Doesn't matter who's driving it. It looks like it's tough. But Albon's consistently getting much closer to points than Latifi is, and Nick de Vries showed it as well at Monza. So if he can come in and do anything close to what Nick did in that car and just give it a bit more push, that's more sponsors for Williams.
Yeah.
That's an opportunity for him to really cement himself in a career, because he's got two good drivers in the car. I think he's a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, because I mean, Sargeant, if you look at his junior career, you know, he went to the line with Piastri and Pourchaire in Formula 3, was leading the championship before that last race in Mugello where it all went wrong. You know, didn't have the budget, so had a tough season in F3s. I think he was with Charouz, and he still managed to get on the podium, and they're not like the best team.
Which is unreal, to get a podium in a Charouz is amazing.
And then, he's been the best rookie so far this year. So I think that, obviously, I just hope it goes well, because I've got a lot of love for Williams. I've got a lot of love for Sargeant as well. I've been following, he's been my driver this year for sure. To see him and Albon together is like beautiful. I'm super happy with that.
Think if he does make it to Formula One, I don't think he needs to beat Albon. Like, the team they've been very impressed by Alex in terms of building the team around him. They just need someone a little bit closer, because
just to do the job, bro. Just to take the car and actually just put it close to the point.
And also, like, Latifi, just on pure pace, like, nothing against Nicholas Latifi, but he's not Formula One quality. Not just in terms of like the results that he got, but his speed. I mean, was it half a second to 6 tenths away? Like, that is not good enough. That's across an entire season. And we saw it right away. It wasn't as if like this gap was building across the season, all the way from Bahrain, from Saudi Arabia, like even Australia, when Alex scored those, his first point for Williams. Like, we saw it straight away that Latifi was just nowhere near. And this is someone that's been at the team for 2 years. So I don't think that Logan Sargeant even needs to beat Albon, because I think they could build the team around Alex.
It was inevitable. But also, like you say, the requirements for Williams are different, and they need solid drivers. And I think Haas are in the same situation, right? Because, I mean, that was a bad race for Mick Schumacher. I don't know if there was some strategy madness or whatever, but like with Magnussen getting in the points, Schumacher nowhere near, like P15 in the end. Like, what do you make of that kind of Haas situation? Because I feel like their requirements are very similar to what Williams want. But I guess Williams have got Sargeant, he's part of their driver academy, the future, whereas Haas, I mean, it feels like they might go for Hülkenberg.
Why was their car so good at the start of the season and so bad now? I have no idea. But also
Alfa Romeo, same as well.
Same thing. But also, on the driver situation, I think that they need to. They need an experienced driver in the car. I get that. If they're going to develop it, they need someone who's experienced, who's going to put the time and the effort in. So probably a K-Mag or a Hülkenberg or whatever basically needs to be in that car. The second driver for me has to be someone young, someone up and coming, to give him a chance in the sport. We don't need Hülkenberg back in the sport. And by the way, I rate Nico Hülkenberg, and he's a very fast driver. And didn't he nearly go to McLaren? No, he went to Mercedes or whatever in the early days as well. Like,
he did,
I rate him highly. But stop bringing old breaders back into the sport.
I mean, how's the last one doing? The last one that came through, Fernando Alonso, how's he doing now?
Fernando Alonso is a two-time world champion.
Oh, there we go.
Nico Hülkenberg is not a two-time world champion.
I think. Do you know what the problem? It is a fact. It is a fact. I think when it comes to the Mick Schumacher situation, and I said this actually on the stream, I almost think it's nothing to do with pure performance. Mick has got closer to K-Mag. Like, in qualifying, he's got closer. In the races, okay, again, we don't know what happened in that race. It was, he should have been in the points. I think
didn't look good. But
exactly. Yeah. But on pure performance, I think he's done enough to warrant a seat. I think that there is something behind the scenes. There was definitely a breakdown in the relationship at the beginning of the year, because Mick was just, again, a cost gap error. And he was absolutely piling these cars into the barrier. And I remember saying he wasn't breaking front wings. This guy was snapping chassis in half, like in Monaco, in Saudi Arabia. And then I think
they can't afford that.
There was some media reports that Gunther Steiner basically just had it out with him in Baku or something. It was either Baku or Austria, like basically in front of the media. And that was a very kind of enough of the soft approach. With it, enough of the soft approach. It's time to really kind of give him the kick up the backside. And if that doesn't, wake him up, then I don't know what will. But it seemed like it did for a while. But I don't think Mick, relationship-wise, reacted well to that kind of encouragement.
This is the problem, right? So Haas, again, they have different requirements. Like if you've got a rookie who's like, look, Verstappen, when he came in, right, Crash Stappen, that was that's what people coined him, right? Because he was rapid, but he had a lot of shunts. And there was enough talent there for Red Bull to be
a little bit.
patient. Yeah, for sure. And there was enough talent there for Red Bull to be patient. With Mick Schumacher, he's shown a good amount, but I think to offset those costs, I guess what I would say to your point, JB, is like, for a team like Haas, why should they go for a junior? Because if they develop a good junior, they're just going to piss off anyway.
True.
Like Leclerc left Alfa Romeo, Russell left Williams. Like you're developing a driver for someone else. I think for a team like Haas, they just need stability, and I think that's what Nico Hülkenberg gives, because he's quick, but also he doesn't crash.
And just for the 1 year, I don't think Haas is this long-term project. You know, we're looking for a guy for the next 3 years. Just get through 1 year. You know, a bit of stability. And then we can reassess our options in 2024. But it's a weird one between Hülkenberg and Schumacher. I think it's all about, even the little joke thing that Mick did in in this weekend where he was wearing like the Gunther t-shirt. I think a small part of that is trying to almost like repair the relationship just a little bit.
Please.
Exactly. I genuinely think it is, because he's seeing his chances slip away. Like maybe Williams is an option if Logan doesn't get the points, but I do still want to see Mick. It's Mick in Formula One, but I think the question for Haas is the upside of Mick and the further development of him getting quicker and better next year, is that gonna be better than what Hülkenberg can bring to the table?
Are we giving Mick too much credit because of his surname as well?
I mean, we're absolutely like. I mean, some people
I think it goes two ways.
Yeah. As in, it's like, there's pressure on the one hand, as in like pressure on him because of the surname, but then also like, do we also go like, but it'd be nice to have a Schumacher in the sport still, and like. He like when I think about the young drivers who come through the last few years, the Lando Norrises, the Carlos Sainzes even for a bit longer, the Charles Leclercs, the Max Verstappens, etc. Like there's been something about them from kind of the get-go where you're like, this guy's sick. George Russell in a Williams, we were like, this guy. Remember, George Russell at Mugello 2020. When he came through that corner, left-hander in quali, and went off the track onto the dirt, came round and
still out-qualified
Latifi. We were like, this man is on smoke with it. And then you think of Mick Schumacher. I can't think of a performance like that where I'm like, actually, this guy is going to be the future of F1.
Yeah, I think the problem is, right, and Russell kind of had this to an extent as well, and that's why even him getting the Mercedes seat, there was still some question marks because his teammates had been a Kubica, who obviously, since his injury wasn't the same driver that he was before, and Latifi, and we all know that Latifi's just not at the level. And then obviously with Schumacher, he had Mazepin as a teammate in first year in a Haas miles back. It was very difficult to get a gauge of how good Mick was, but we know how good K-Mag is. Like he's raced at multiple different teams.
We know what level he is. The perfect comparison for Mick.
And I think Mick's done enough on pace, but I just think the shunts for Haas, I get why there's these question marks. I really do.
And it's not just the beginning of the season. Like again, Suzuka, end of free practice. I know it was raining. I know it was wet conditions. Cold tires. The session was actually over. I think it was FP2 maybe. Even that shunt.
He did aquaplane, which I'm just like, how much can you kind of maybe...
But the thing is, that's still costing Haas. And Mick is definitely. I mean, I haven't seen like the figures, but I've seen like some figures on Twitter. So take it with a bucket of salt. But your eyes tell you he's the most expensive driver in terms of the crash damage. And a team like Haas, they're not a Ferrari. They don't have that. They're not even operating at the budget cap. Let's just remember that, by the way. I think only Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull are actually operating at that 145 or 135 million budget cap. So
or 146.8 million if maybe you're Red Bull. Should we talk about the cost cap, boys?
No.
Look, okay. So we're recording this straight after the race at Kota. Hopefully more information will be coming out soon. I know Christian Horner was saying in the press conference he hopes that this can get sorted before the end of the weekend. It clearly hasn't been. I think some I heard that on Twitter that I think because of Dietrich Mateschitz passing, I think that's kind of been pushed back a bit. Look, boys, where do we sit? Because we don't know. There's been all these rumours and leaks, and leaks proved to be somewhat true, not fully, because Aston. Initially it was Aston Minor overspend, Red Bull Major. Then it was like, actually no. The reality is Red Bull Minor, Aston Martin procedural. I guess what I want to ask is Christian Horner right to be as livid as he was in that press conference yesterday?
Yeah. He's doing his job. Like he's doing his job as always. He's protecting Red Bull. He's looking after his team. And he's gonna stand by them through whatever. Right? Like that's what he does. He does it really, really well.
That's what he's paid to do.
Exactly. At the same time, all Zac Brown had to say was, "I didn't overspend." Like when Christian was going at him in that thing, he could have been like, "I didn't overspend."
Well, Tom Clarkson's up because Christian had said about how complicated it was, and then he said, to Jost and to Zac, like, how was it from your end? And both of them,
no problem.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, obviously they're going to say that as well. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because they're all playing the game.
Everything's accounting and everything is a rounding error for those guys. But I'm pretty hardline with my opinions for like with this kind of stuff. Like same with drivers. I think that if you drivers in F1 should be the fastest 20 on the planet. The rules of the white line should be enforced at the white line. The rules of money being spent should be held at the final penny. Like you spend exactly within it. If you spend over it, like you get a hard penalty for it. All these things need hard penalties. Or
what do you think is the hard penalty that you think is the right one?
My biggest problem is I don't know, because in my head, I look back. I love rallying as well. I've watched rallying my whole life, and they have taken championships away from teams that have cheated. If we want to call it cheating, they've taken championships from people in the past. So could you take it last year away? I don't know if the teams want that. The teams want the future championships taken away, as we discussed on the previous broadcast. But like, I think that it needs to be harsh so that no one overspends.
Because I think one of the reasons why, and I'm going to kind of point out to Zac Brown and McLaren specifically, one of the reasons why the team principals don't care too much about last year, forget about taking the championship away. Zac Brown's thinking the long term. I'm trying to make McLaren into a championship winning team in the next couple of years. So forget about what happened last year. I want this to affect Red Bull for the next 2-3 years, so it gives us the advantage in the long term. So I think that's why they're thinking of a big penalty that might affect them for the next 2-3 years, because that will give McLaren
they're playing
a benefit
catch up as well. So if they can make that catch up easier,
But teams are going to always think of themselves, and I guess that's where we can listen to these team principals talking, but ultimately they've all got vested interests. I think it's one of them we have to try and look as fans and be objective and take the kind of names of the teams away, because I know there's a lot of sentiment around this because of how things ended last year. There's a lot of kind of anti-Max, anti-Red Bull sentiment, and look, people are entitled to their opinions, but I think this, because it's Red Bull, that makes this whole, like I was saying this on stream,
and they've just
if it was
won the
Aston Martin,
championship.
no one would give a fuck if it was Aston Martin who overspent last year. Not like it, because the potential repercussions wouldn't potentially change things.
Yeah, I think is as well, like the anti-Max, anti-Red Bull sentiment from last year is just kind of wrong, because it should be an anti-FIA sentiment. We've seen the FIA do blunders all of this year and all of last year, or stuff that we can definitely debate around whether it was right or wrong.
Sure.
And the end of last season was an FIA blunder. It wasn't a Red Bull
Max didn't do anything wrong.
Max did nothing wrong on track. Like, he did everything that he was supposed to do in that moment.
If you're not going to punish someone for pushing someone 3 miles wide at Brazil, then why blame him for you can't blame him for doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, as in, if it's calm to do that, then do it. That's what Charles said afterwards as well.
Yeah.
This is a Red Bull problem. This Red Bull have overspent.
Yeah.
That's not the FIA.
Yeah.
That's not anyone else. Now, the FIA has an opportunity here to be good and do their thing and actually say, right, like, we are the FIA. We're supposed to enforce the rules. I'm going to enforce the rules. It becomes an FIA blunder the moment they don't enforce these rules.
And they're already on sketchy ground from last year, from Japan. Like, I mean, again, they put Eduardo Freitas on the sideline, said, we're not going to forget about the rotating race directors. We're just going to have, I forget.
Vitic.
Yeah, Vitic.
Vitic, yeah.
So they're already on shaky ground. I think this is almost I think this is a possibility for them to almost stamp their authority and get a bit more, I don't know what the right word is, but a bit more back, reputation, a bit more of their reputation back.
Yeah, because
so it's a big one.
We've just been talking about the FIA constantly for the last 2 seasons.
It's been
it feels pretty much. But obviously, what I specifically want to ask, I suppose, when I say about Christian Horner being as kind of angry as he was, because he's specifically, we saw in the press conference that happened yesterday, specifically around this whole, like, the definition of what you want to call cheating, because obviously there's maliciously, hired in payments and all that. And then there's always a conversation of intent in any sport, right? And that's what's riled Christian up. I also think, I think given the news that came out yesterday about Dietrich, I can understand why Christian would feel more of a responsibility, even more so than normal, to like defend his team. But also at the same time, like from what I've seen from this letter, the full letter hasn't been leaked, but BBC and Zac Brown hasn't directly said, but also the team principals were very quick to run their mouths when this was like a leak, very Singapore.
Everyone,
Zac were going,
Northo was in it. I mean, again, just remember that when other team principals, when other teams see a potential, almost like a little weakness, in Red Bull, they're always going to have this, and they're always going to get their little dig and everything. Always put their foot in it.
Gunther Steiner said this, didn't he? He was like, no one cares that our car's similar to Ferrari unless we're doing well.
Yeah. Well, so I've been racing my whole life. my dad has always told me one statement that has stayed with me throughout that. I'd probably get it tattooed, which is excuses we don't want, results we do, right? In this instance, it doesn't matter whether you did it from negligence or actively. You have overspent. If I take it back to speed on the motorway, get caught by a Gatso, like one of those yellow cameras, they don't care.
It's true.
If I wasn't looking at my speedometer,
it's true.
And I was doing 80. Oh yeah. No, I was doing 80. I wasn't paying attention. Or if I was like, nah, bro, I'm pinning it and I'm doing 80. Like either way.
And this guy does pin it. Let's just say I've been in a car with him. Like
he does not. I want to go on record and say that he does not do that. But
officers of the law.
But either way, like. You can't just be like, oh no, I didn't mean
Whoops.
to.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry, FIA. Because then next year, as with all the TikToks that have been going around about like Mercedes misinterpreting the rules and having a rocket ship or like whatever next year, like, oh no, sorry boys, we screwed up.
The way they've also there's been a lot made about the fact that the way they've overspent. It doesn't have anything to do with the car performance, but a Formula One team is all about those two cars.
Any money,
result.
it doesn't matter if you're directly spending it on. You could be spending it on sandwiches, fine, but then that's still money from the cost cap, so that you're not spending it.
Anyone who says like, oh, it was catering, it doesn't affect the car. Do you understand how maths works? Like you've got a cost cap, and you can either put catering over the top of that, or R&D over the top of that, or whatever you want, wherever the line is, put whatever you fancy over that line. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Either way, they've overspent over the cost cap.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
And there is a few. I think there was some other stuff as well in terms of like some of the R&D stuff. There was like a HMRC like rebate or something that they were supposed to get money back from the HMRC. I mean, all of this is boring like tax stuff, and they didn't. So, but again. I totally understand that frustration. There was also apparently a reclarification with the FIA about like spare parts, but the other teams were able to get around
and
that.
This was a process as well. Like this wasn't like you just submit this is what Zac and Jos were saying. You don't just submit it at the end. This was a process. So for Red Bull, like for me, Red Bull have cocked up massively here. That they know it. I think they're just going on kind of damage limitation. And I mean, for me, I think as time's gone on, I've come more towards the more hardline stance with you. Like, even if you just overspend by a little bit, you just have to come down firm on it. And it might seem harsh, but I just think, like, I don't know, what punishment constitutes harsh? I don't think we can go back and take points away personally, not because of what happened in Abu Dhabi, but because I don't want to get to a point 10 months after every season, and hopefully they'll speed up this process, where potentially it's like you've won the championship, but you might lose it in 10 months. I get it, but I don't. That's my main issue with that. So I'm just like,
and it's a big
ballast.
And the problem is that
100 kilos of dead lead in the bottom of it. Sodom.
And
it either has to be monetary, but so much money that it's literally like
take it off the cost cap.
I think The problem is that Red Bull, again, keep in mind that those top teams, they had to come down from the cost cap. They've got money. Whatever fine is given to them, they've got plenty, and they've also got much better lawyers than the FIA as well. Like the reason why this whole plea deal is like being talked about, the FIA don't want to go to court because the people that actually realize like the FIA don't have enough more money than the teams. Like the teams have so much money and so many lawyers that they could probably fight it until for the next couple of years. That's why this plea whole plea deal.
Then
they want to sort it out.
Just include lawyer fees in the cost cap.
Well, there you go. I mean,
it's just a constant circle of we're overspending on lawyers.
But it makes it also awkward that it is Red Bull that have won the drivers last year and the drivers and constructors. You can't take that away from the fact that the team that has overspent in whatever capacity, I tell you what, the rumor's 1.8 mil, Christian Horner says 200, but they're the team
if the rule was, I appreciate Tommo's point around like you don't want to wait 10 months, but if the rule was you overspend, you get DQ'd from the championship. No teams overspending. There's never going to be a catering.
But there's got to be nuance as well. I feel like there's got to be some kind
also
of
part of me thinks if that was DQ from the championship, I could get behind that if that was if that was
from
written from the start. I think because they've given all of these options,
then it's
And look, I just don't want to be in another like Ferrari 2019 bollocks about the engine where it's all kept behind closed doors. That's why I worry about that, and also where if Red Bull accepts this ADA and or ABA whatever it is, and then apparently it all should come out. Like I just want to talk about racing cars at the end of the day, and it has felt like this is just a another thing to add to the list. Like you said earlier, I think the FIA, have to take a good hard, and I hope, especially after Suzuka, because that was a sketchy weekend. They seem to have implemented things that seem to work at COTA in terms of the recovery vehicles, and they've added stuff. But I just think there's a lot more accountability, and I think as fans, we saw some we've seen stuff like every weekend from fan behaviour that we don't all like, right? Enough, you got fans screaming and shouting like cheater at Max and Checo, which at the end of the day, I just think that's not their behaviour personally.
Max did the talking on the track.
The drivers, the drivers are there to drive the car. If you got an issue with team, whatever. But I just I think that lack of transparency from the FIA is yet another reason to be
and also the one thing that I do feel sorry for when it comes to Red Bull, that information in whatever capacity should not have been leaked from the FIA.
Point. How the fuck did that leak?
That is seriously confidential stuff that there should never have been any rumors, and that's on the FIA. Because Red Bull, this should have been sorted out. Of course, we want to see the transparency, but not from rumors or
Nah, this is how the paddock works though. The paddock works like that. The rumors spread so fast. These guys go for drinks with each other. They have a good time together. Red Bull hosts parties in the thing with other teams coming to join them. It's all chill.
Someone's been slipping something in the FIA's drink.
Because I think once the FIA tell Red Bull, we think you've overspent by 1.8 mil, or whatever it is, then it'll probably leak. So I think you just go public with that. At the start, I was like, well, what's the point in telling Red Bull? But then I guess you have to kind of account for a period where they can kind of come back and debate it or whatever. But I think when that news is just within the FIA, I don't think that there's an excuse for that getting out.
And also, what Christian Horner has hated is the fact that the numbers, we still don't actually know what the number is. Now some more credible, sources and credible, organizations have said that it's $1.8 million, but Toto Wolff said that it was a major breach in, that it was a lot of money in Singapore. Then apparently it might have been £200,000. Then apparently made 1.8. So we don't even know what the number is.
I get why Christians are not Toto was saying things that are now known to not be true.
He never said Red Bull though, did he?
He's
I guess he was maybe careful with his words.
It's just, but it's just like that Zac Brown letter. Yes, he didn't say Red Bull cheated, but he said, if you breach the cost cap, that constitutes cheating.
These team principals know what they're doing.
I would say cutting a corner is cheating, right? Spending too much money is cheating.
You know cutting corners, don't we all know that.
If you haven't already watched the YouTuber karting championship that Aldas and I did,
that's true.
Go take a look and you'll see what it looks like.
Who's the champion of that, real quick?
The really light one.
P1, baby. As many champions.
You've ruined. No one's going to watch it now. Everyone knows what happened. What a waste of time.
Spoiler alert.
Cut that one out.
Look. Hopefully we've got 3 races to go this year. Hopefully this will get ironed out. What do we think the main kind of learnings are from this season as a whole? Because it's first season of the new regulations. Ultimately, have we been happy with the new regs? Has it met your expectations, these new cars?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they delivered in terms of, we've also learned a few things like that they're actually a bit worse in the wet, but I think that they've delivered on the core principles of what they came in to do in terms of make the racing closer. And I think we have seen that. It's been a bit frustrating that Ferrari has kind of not been able to really push Red Bull the entire way, but there was a opportunity that Red Bull could have just dominated this championship, but we did get kind of a title fight at the beginning. I think the midfield has been super close. It's not all over as well between the likes of, obviously Aston Martin and Alpine and, teams like that and McLaren. So I think overall there's still things to improve, the porpoising and the ride, quality for the drivers. I still think that there's some kind of learnings that need to be made in terms of the long-term health, for the drivers with all of this bouncing. Lewis actually came out with a really interesting statement that after Canada, he did like a corporate or filming day with the 2021 car in Austin. And he just got out of it and absolutely loved how smooth it was. And it was just the best thing ever. And then obviously getting back into the W13, it was just like the most horrible thing. So there's still a few things that need to be improved. But overall, I think these cars, I think they have done exactly what they set out to do. And I also think they look sick as well, by the way. Really? I love the low noses. I love them.
I think they look worse, unfortunately. Not all, I kind of like them. I haven't quite made my way over to them yet, but I like how they've increased how close the drivers can get to each other, because particularly drivers like Max and Lewis, they sit so close behind other drivers for such a long time, within 8/10 for most of the damn race. It's crazy. So I really like that part of it. I also think think that Toto was proven right when he said, I think it was in the Beyond the Grid podcast, that the by changing the regs, you would only cause more problems in terms of having one dominant team, because when you've got teams that can spend loads of money and put the R&D in to make a new car, they will inevitably make a new car that's really, really fast, and you'll have a lead
I think it's
team.
over a period. You've got to see this over a period of time.
And then over years it catches up.
Yeah.
So he was like, I think basically in the podcast, I can't remember perfectly, but he basically said something around how if you keep the rules and regs the same for a long period of time, everyone ends up with the same car.
Exactly. Eventually they all kind of come together.
Exactly.
But
and we've seen that even this season. Like most teams have gone with the Red Bull concept. They've looked at Mercedes, they've looked at Ferrari,
they'll
they've looked at Red
converge.
Bull, and they've gone Red Bull's the one.
But I guess with the addition of the cost cap, because you had Mercedes, Ferrari were spending like 350, 400 million. Like numbers
Mercedes were actually losing. It's actually a fun fact. Mercedes were actually losing money when they were winning all those championships in 15, 16, 17. They were losing money compared to what they were spending.
It's worth it for Daimler. It's worth it.
For the advertisement of Mercedes, like that's gone through the roof.
That's what I mean. They can't do that anymore.
Worth it.
I don't know. For me, given my expectations, I think they've actually overperformed, over-delivered on my expectations. When you look at the full field spread, I was watching. I think it was a couple of days ago. I had Discuss Sports F1 on like all day, and it showed like a replay of 2007 Indianapolis when Lewis won, and the field spread in qualifying, the gap between like P1 and last was like 6-7 seconds.
Yeah,
and like we saw. I think it was last, not race was just watched, the last one, and the full field spread in Q1 was like 2 seconds. I think we are getting there.
And also Alex Albon in the car that is at the back, in the team that is last in constructors. What was it, 1.1 seconds away from pole or something like? I think it was in Q2.
So I think when you look at it like that, I think that given this is the first, and we always see with new regulations, it splits the field. Like you're going to get some teams who nail it, and it takes time for that to converge. And I think, given that, I've been pleasantly surprised. I guess the problem is that there is a certain driver who hasn't maybe looked at these new regulations so kindly, because it hasn't been great, although it wasn't great last year either. We have to kind of talk about Daniel Ricciardo, I think, to wrap this out, because it was a poor race at Qatar. Again, maybe same with Mick. We don't know what strategy-wise played a part in that.
He did get a slow stop. There was a 4 second stop in the middle that I did spot.
4 seconds gap. I mean, you had Vettel with a 16-second gap to finish P8.
Yeah.
There's been talk, Red Bull Reserve, Daniel Ricciardo. Just for that specifically, Red Bull Reserve, should he take it?
Absolutely not. That is honestly the worst thing ever.
That's like admission.
I mean, it could be cap.
That's admission of so
absolute
much.
It's absolute Twitter bollocks I've ever heard it. There's no way you take that, even if it's true. That is literally that's the worst of the whatever. How many options he has? I mean, the reason why I think one of the biggest reasons why he's struggling is just because he's struggling mentally. He's at a team, he's trying to smile and kind of be the Daniel Ricciardo that we all love, but I think mentally he's struggling, to adapt to the car, to the team. He knows he's out. The worst thing that could happen now is to go back to the team that he left of his own accord.
Kick this all off.
Exactly. Yeah. He threw away a race-winning car at the time. And to go back to the team where, Max has now made it absolutely his own, to be a third driver, like what? And also,
that is
honestly the worst of all of the options. Like Ferrari, Mercedes, even being a third driver there is better than Red Bull because of what that team means and because of the fact that he left them because of Max Verstappen.
Well, what does Daniel Ricciardo want to do with his F1 career now as well? Like, as in, think about if Daniel Ricciardo had left after his year at Renault and just like, I'm going to take some time off, people would be begging for him to come back. Because he'd have been,
because he left on such a high.
Yeah. Now he's had 2 seasons of some pure struggle. It's like, what's next for him? Like, what does he want to do? Does he want to keep being in this scenario where he's struggling against Lando Norris or an equivalent driver, obviously, in the future for him?
I don't think he knows what he wants to. Right. I honestly don't think that Daniel Ricciardo right now even knows himself what he wants to do next year.
And it's telling that no one else is asking for him. If Daniel Ricciardo is as amazing as we want him to be, teams are lapping him up. They're moving contracts around to get him involved.
I think a big part of the problem is that Daniel doesn't fully seem to understand why it hasn't worked, because you can talk about environment and all that, right? But at the end of the day, I feel like McLaren have supported him, and he got the win. Like he knows on certain days he has been able to drive that car, but consistently Lando has been, when when Daniel has had over these last 2 seasons like a good day, he's like and maybe beating Lando. Lando's always like right behind him. And then when Daniel's having a bad day, he's like nowhere, and Lando's like fighting for podiums, like, especially last year.
Monaco?
Oh, that was last year, yeah.
Last year, yeah.
I think the one, although just to give a little bit of prop to Ricciardo, and I'm going to go back to Monza, the one thing that he has said in his career, whenever he's been, even at his lowest in 2021, whenever he's been put in a position to win a race, he has always capitalized. I don't actually remember too many fumbled wins by Daniel Ricciardo.
It's a good point.
He's always, even at his lowest,
he has to be offered the opportunities to win in order for that to make any sense.
Yeah, I know, but that's the issue.
Right.
I want to see how. I think one of the reasons why he might take a year out. Well, he's going to take a year out into looking at the options, but I want to see how hungry is he really to be in Formula One. When he's out of the sport, when Fernando was out, he was hating it. I think, willing.
But there's a different issue for Ricciardo, because again, if he doesn't understand why it went wrong, how can he guarantee? Because that's the problem, right? When you sign a driver, so when Ferrari signed Carlos Sainz from McLaren, okay, they signed him on the assumption that they would get a level that they'd seen. And I think Carlos has very much delivered on that level. He outscored Charles in his first season. That was
position
incredible.
Today as well.
Yeah, like he's had.
Could have been better.
Sure, he's had his fumbles, but all in all, I think they've got what they wanted from that. What was advertised, that's what they've got. With McLaren, like, they didn't get that. Daniel very much, he's at a kind of a loss. Yeah. That's, I guess, the issue. And that's why I don't think any other teams felt the confidence, because how do you know that you're going to get, are you going to get the McLaren Ricciardo, or are you going to get the Renault Ricciardo?
I always think about it in terms of who's he going to unseat. So which other team is he unseating the driver? At least in like the top teams, he's not unseating anyone from Red Bull or Merc. He's not unseating anyone from Ferrari. So his top teams are out of the question. I don't think he's unseating anyone from Renault right now, because Alpine, basically who's going forward. Who's he unseating?
I think he might have got an opportunity at Renault, but I think who's the guy? Is it De Maison?
It's like De Mayo, isn't it? Like
Luca De Mayo, that's it.
Luca De Mayo, yeah.
He I think he vetoed that.
I think it was the perception. This guy,
which I understand.
This guy a year and a half ago, he chose to leave our team.
Yeah.
Now, also, by the way, his contract was up, so it wasn't as if he left, completely. Like, his contract was up, and he chose to go to McLaren. But I think it's the perception. Like Luca De Mayo, who's I think is the president of Renault. It's not even Alpine, but like the actual company. It was like, this is the guy that bailed on us. We don't want him. We want to go in a different way. We'd rather go with Pierre Gasly. And I actually think that's fair enough.
Yeah, I think Danny Rick Gasly would have been a cool lineup.
That would, but I mean, where does that leave Ocon as well, though?
Exactly. So,
but one question I have with all of this Daniel Ricciardo is, where does this leave Lando Norris, and how good is Lando Norris really? Because I think it's very difficult to judge him. Is Lando Norris just off this world, like right now, world championship potential? Like, he would be fighting for the world championship, or has he maybe looked a little bit too good up against Daniel Ricciardo? And we have to go back to what he did against Sainz 2 years ago. I think all of these questions is why I'm also super excited about Norris, and next year against him and Piastri. Like, that's going to be my kind of teammates to watch.
What I hear from my McLaren friends is that he's absolutely rapid. But then they are biased, so as you would.
No, he's actually slow.
But as in I think the team likes him a lot, and like wants to see if they can give him the right car. Like they're doing everything in their power to give him the right car.
Well, because Lando said he had conversations with Red Bull, and he's shown, which I think there's numerous like levels to why he didn't maybe follow that opportunity. I think he's right to kind of plant his flag, be to McLaren what Leclerc is to Ferrari, what Verstappen is to Red Bull, what I think Russell will become to Mercedes. Not at the moment, obviously, once Lewis retires. I think Lando's done everything. Like, his first year, he was very close to Carlos, like in performance-wise, like right up there. And you look at how much experience Carlos has had. I think as well, like Carlos's first year at McLaren was probably his strongest year in F1 as well. Like, he had I think when he left Renault to go to McLaren, that was a real good move for him, and that gave him the Ferrari.
And it was a new lease of life as well. That was the first year where I think he was cut ties with Red Bull completely. McLaren was his start of his real career. In the same way that I think Alpine is going to be the start of Gasly's almost second career in a way. What can you do outside of Red Bull?
Because look, I personally, I didn't take Lando when he first came in. I didn't take him that seriously. I'll be the first to
George
admit.
just beating him, hadn't he? As well,
Yeah.
So.
And that still gets recycled now, actually, when you like people still talk about F2, and I think that's
But honestly,
so far away now.
now I'm going Lando over George.
Really, I'm still going George.
For me, I'm going Lando.
But I think they're so close, and it's so exciting. Like,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's like, fight between the two.
It's not a done thing at all. But I just think that Lando has. I guess when you're scrap, I think George obviously had that time in the Williams where it was difficult for him to really make an impression. Lando's consistently been in midfield cars, been able to develop. Very rarely do we see like a bad performance. Like we've seen him bottle it at Russia, but that was as much, if not more, the team's fault, I think. But I think, I don't know, we've seen like, it's been messy from George this kind of second half of the season. I don't think we've seen that messiness from Lando Norris personally.
I mean, the fact that he's still best of the rest. He had like that run of races where maybe like 4 in a row he got 7th place, which is like, again, best of the rest if you look at the top
but
3.
Lando v George is like a big...
It is, yeah.
Who would you go for, George?
Oh, it's hard. I'm kind of with Aldas that it would be George. George is currently outscoring, I know obviously form is different, but he's currently outscoring a 7-time world champion. Lando's being a guy who's having a really hard time in his career. So
I think it's all about the teammates. I want to see, that's why I'm so excited with the whole Piastri thing, because again, it's weird comparing the Lando of 2020 to the Lando of 2022, because he did get beat by Sainz, and he was quicker than Sainz, but Sainz had that race know-how. He kept it a little bit more cleaner. He was a little bit more experienced in terms of how to carry the race, or all the way through with the tires and just manage it, and that's why he came out ahead of Lando. But I want to see Lando up against, again, an Oscar Piastri, a superstar in the making, and how is he going to react
even
to
Oscar
that?
Piastri, we still don't know. Like
he's coming in.
He's still a rookie.
So Piastri has an excuse coming in next season.
Yeah.
Whereas like Lando won't have an excuse, I guess, if he gets beaten. But also, there's no reason to believe that he should have been better. If you know what I mean, you need to see Lando against someone who's seasoned and whatever. I'm also with you on it in terms of like Lando's gone way up my estimations. Like I was like, is this guy serious when he first came in? And now I think, yeah, he's definitely serious. I think it's I try and think of it in terms of how exciting it is. We've got a really exciting crop of very fast drivers who are going to be really good when some of the old guard disappear, like the Sebs, the Lewises, etc. So I'm really excited for that. Who's going to come out on top? Beforehand, we spoke like a long time ago, 2020. I think I said it was probably going to be Charles. At the moment, it's Max. If anyone's going to take it to Max, it's going to be George, Lando, or Charles.
So
They're the guys.
I think we all agree that Lando undoubtedly has world championship potential.
Yeah, 100%.
When he gets put in that situation, we're gonna find out what he's really made of. When you get into a race winning car, I said that with George actually. When you get into a race winning car in a championship fight, that asks a very different question of the way of what driver you are and the way you lead the team and emotionally how good you are. But is that going to be at McLaren?
One of the scariest things, I think, for every driver who I've just mentioned is that Max is currently winning consistently like it's nothing. So Max is on the fast track to feeling exceptionally comfortable in basically any situation that he can win. So all these other guys are going to have to get there and then prove they can beat him.
But he's got the team. He's got the team.
That's where in the past, right, you had like a Schumacher rise up, and you what we're seeing from Max now, you can definitely draw parallels.
Yeah, 100%.
Like I'm not sitting here saying like I think he's in the like greatest of all time or top 10 or any of that nonsense, right? But what I'm saying is that the trajectory he's on is unreal, right? Because he's 25 still. But I just the problem is, right, the good thing is, right, back in the day there wasn't a cost cap like Ferrari could just massively outspend and they could do their thing. Now, because of the cost cap, like imagine you've got like, give it a few years and you've got a Red Bull with Max leading the line, you've got a Ferrari with Charles, you've got a Mercedes with maybe George and Lewis, but like, say Lewis retires, George,
Fernando Alonso and an Aston Martin.
Fernando, obviously, in like 2020.
He'll still be there. He's racing in his... Yeah. Still a rookie.
That's what I mean. I just think I do hope, because I think Max is like best driver in the year. Like I think he's the best driver in F1 right now. Like easy for sure.
In terms of form, everything.
Yeah. I just really hope that this cost cap is going to do what I guess we've been sold, because as much as, again, it's not as much of a meritocracy as we'd like, it's still very good.
And races like today show that it can happen. I mean, we've got a 3 manufacturer podium, which is nice.
Yep.
And it was probably about where they deserve to be as well for each of the drivers. Like Leclerc probably deserves a P3, Lewis probably deserved a P2, and Max deserved a P1, minus Carlos getting taken out early on. That was about where they deserve to be.
You said a good point, actually. Lando, McLaren. Do you think McLaren will be the team to give Lando that, or
how long does he wait?
Because again, like we're talking about Mercedes, Lewis, that's the next most obvious top seat to potentially become available in the next few years. Is that a door he should be knocking on? Because imagine like Lando, George's teammates. I saw your tweet about it, and I've talked about these, like them two as teammates. Yeah. Surely that would be, because I feel like they are on, as much as I pick Lando, I think they are on very similar levels. You've got to be
thinking it, because just as much as a race between the drivers and the cars and the drivers are all brought together by a team, and we've seen some incredible teams. Like, so however much I find Christian Horner annoying to deal with,
I don't know what you mean.
He has pulled together an unbelievable team.
Oh, you can't.
And Toto Wolff similarly can get on people's nerves. He's pulled together an exceptional team, and they've done some incredible things.
But they've maintained those standards on so many years.
And so like the people like Zac Brown, Günther Steiner, etc., all have to be called into question because they are leading teams. Like at work, like for me, there is always a boss, and that boss is always called into question when it comes down to it. It's not always the people who are on the thing or whatever. Ultimately, there's a responsible person. And
it starts at the top, doesn't it?
Exactly. And so like they've got to be thinking like, is Zac Brown going to get me to a championship? Is Toto Wolff going to get me to a championship?
I think Lando's definitely. It's weird because the thing about Lando and McLaren is that it goes a lot more deeper than Formula One. Even the commercial stuff and all of the stuff he does with McLaren, it's much more rooted than just the racing. But the racing is the priority. The racing is why he's there. That's why he's got his massive brand and all the success is because the racing does the talking. And if McLaren continue, they've fallen behind Alpine. Like, to be fair, I think there was a moment last year where if you had the choice to go to either Alpine or McLaren, I'd always go to McLaren because they were just the team that looked a little bit more on the up, a bit more exciting. But they have fallen behind Alpine. And at what point does Lando in 2023 or 2024?
Whoops. Carry on.
At what point does Lando kind of think, actually, listen, as much as I love McLaren, as much as this, this team and this brand really, we're like this in the moment. This team is not going to get it done. They keep letting me down, and I don't have enough faith in them. And Mercedes are coming calling.
I just think for now, there's not a seat, a top team out there that's really begging. So I think this gives, again, I feel like we're going to get at least 2, maybe 3 more years out of Lewis. So I think that gives time for McLaren to prove that they can, because they've got the new wind tunnel coming. Like, talk's a big talk, got a lot of marketing money coming in. I think that their trajectory since Fernando left, funnily enough, has been like steadily improving. It's been a bit of a false start this year.
Plateaued just a little bit and just beginning to plateau.
But it's a new regulation. Like you can, I think Alpine made a big jump up, Alfa Romeo, big jump up at the start of the year anyway. No, I just think that gives McLaren time to prove to Lando that they can be the team to facilitate, because you don't want to be in an instance where, he's still just banging these incredible seasons.
Another P7.
And then a seat becomes available and you're not ready to give.
Well, actually, I want to get kind of like your thoughts on this. We talked about, in terms of the seats coming available, let's say Perez perhaps doesn't quite, Nick de Vries is not ready. Perez, continues to struggle, and the Mercedes and Ferrari get even closer to Red Bull, to the point where the better driver lineups of both Ferrari and Mercedes actually kind of, it's beginning to be a problem for Red Bull that maybe Perez is not delivering. Would you, as Lando Norris, go, calling to Red Bull, actively seeking out a seat in Max Verstappen's team?
Poison chalice. There's no chance. There's no chance I'm taking.
So if you were Lando Norris and you were able to go to Red Bull, a championship-winning team, a race-winning team
unless I backed myself to the hilt that I was going to go in there, and
I think these drivers do, mate. That's why they're in Formula One.
I know, but as in everyone's got a doubt. Everyone's going to be there like, can I beat Max? Like, and if you can't, you are committing to know that you don't have it. You could go to, like, in Danny Rick's example, he went to Renault at the time and had the opportunity to like see where he was compared to some other drivers, get out of the poison chalice that is going up against Max Verstappen. Like, if I'm in his position, you want to take it. It's a nice fast car for you. You're going to get some good results, but are you just stat padding and getting beaten?
This is what I said,
because that was my tweet, by the way.
You can, if he wanted to win races, go to Red Bull and sit in that seat. But to go to that team, how ingrained Max is, how incredible Max is,
but if he thinks he's better than Max Verstappen, that doesn't matter.
Have you seen the videos of Perez at Monaco where it's like there's Horner and Helmut Marko and everyone all up in Max's garage and they're all laughing, and then there's just Sergio Perez sitting in the corner like in his own garage.
The thing is, right, they've got drivers have to be strategic, right? You cannot be the best driver, but you can still win a championship. I don't know, maybe this is a bit harsh on Jenson Button, but in 2009, right, I don't think Jenson Button was the best driver on that 2009 grid.
Really?
But he won the championship. No.
I think they had a car that was on a different level to begin the championship.
At the beginning of the season, though, it kind of tailed off a little bit, but I think it's actually a better example of like, drivers like Damon Hill or like Jacques Villeneuve. Like, those Williamses were absolutely just nuts, even more than the Brawn, to be honest.
And that's what I mean, like the strategic levels. But again, what we hope for with the cost cap is that it will get to a stage where it won't hopefully matter too much what team you're on.
Yeah.
There's always going to be that. And I want that there to be that differentiating factor.
Teams have got to work for it.
I just think if you're Lando Norris, I mean, I think he's championship ready right now. And it's 2023, 2024, 2025, and I'm still at McLaren fighting for fourth in the constructors.
Yeah.
How long can he wait? I don't know. The guy wants to win championships right now. Not
at the same time, though, think about like Max had the patience because like, if you go back to like,
but his team was winning races.
Yeah,
like,
but
he won his first race for Red Bull.
But even go back to like 2018. I know they're one extra team out, but like 2018, 2019, whatever. Red Bull was solidly a third team on the grid. Like they were where
Mercedes are now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were the third team. They could win the odd race, but like they weren't really there for it. It was the Lewis and Seb show. So all Norris needs to be is to feel that blood that he can be in that spot as well. And then
I guess as well, like Red Bull had that more recent pedigree. Yeah, they delivered those 4 titles with Vettel. You have to go much further back.
Yeah, well, a few more years, I guess. Yeah,
yeah, and I think as well, the McLaren team that last was very successful with Lewis at the helm.
It's very different.
It's a completely different team to what it is now.
Yeah.
So I think there's maybe that as well. Like I think that naivety maybe showed in Russia, where I think the team just kind of bottled that and needed to like be firm. Like if that's a Bono or a GP on the radio to Lando, they're like firm instruction, do this, and
but that was, I mean, that weekend as a whole, you know, he was one that set pole position.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
So
what I'm saying is,
steps.
like we're seeing from Ferrari at the minute, I think that's showing that naivety and that they don't have that experience, and I guess that's maybe the one concern. But hopefully, you know, Lando can keep.
That's what I said about teams. It's McLaren isn't just like a name and a car. It's a team of people, and it's the same with all of these different teams. You got to believe the people around you are going to get you there. So like, if I think if Toto Wolff left Mercedes for Ferrari, there's a lot of people that would follow him there. If Zac Brown left McLaren for Renault or even for Ferrari or whatever, same thing, would Lando follow Zac Brown there? And the team?
Yeah, Lando's not. Zach's not built that stock.
That's what I'm saying.
Like a Horner or a Toto Wolff have.
People are going to follow the Horners. Are they going to follow Zach? Nothing against Zach Brown, by the way. I think he's sick, but like,
no, he just hasn't. He's not been in the sport.
And shout him out also for putting out Mario Andretti in the McLaren.
That was good to see.
That was sick.
Great track.
And I made the joke like he's been signing IndyCar drivers, he's been signing random Formula 1 drivers. Now he's gone to get this retired bloke that was like the 70th world champion.
Yeah.
Oh, and quickly, I know we've gone over an hour now, but I want to quickly talk about Andretti. You reminded me actually, because Mario's been chatting and he's basically saying we're acting like we've got a car ready for 2024. Like, and that's a new team. Like they're doing what they need to do to have a car ready for 2024.
Are they building a net new team? So as in like everything's new?
Yeah.
Wow. That's huge.
I think they'd love to get, and obviously there's this little like Audi, you know, they've said that they're building a power unit. I think Andretti would love to like collaborate with them.
Yep.
But there has been, from the establishment, there has been a hell of a lot of like negativity about Andretti potentially joining, even from Formula 1 themselves. Stefano Domenicali, I think, came out and said that we don't really need an 11th team. And I think it's very interesting, especially from like the Mercedes side. I don't really like what Toto Wolff says. You got to remember that Toto Wolff he's not just a team principal, he's a part owner of Mercedes. So another team, like I think 33%. So another team coming in, that's less of the pie for him. Directly, that affects his wallet.
Bollocks. The F1 pie should be bigger. It's bigger than the sport's ever been. Like, I don't understand. Like saying,
where's all this money
what does it do? It's like, you know, I'm sorry, like, I get we've had like HRTs, Mauritius, Virgin, like at the back who have just done nothing, right? They don't add anything to the sport. I get that, but I just, you know, in this cost cap day and age, I don't see why. Like we saw Haas jump in. They bought the old Marussia factory, and they came in and put it like they were like midfield, solid midfield in their first season. I don't understand this argument against it.
So my only worry is not about that. Like I think more the merrier up to a point. Like so long as you,
and I think a name like Andretti,
Andretti as well, agreed. But I always like a brand new team is difficult because there's only so much F1 talent around, like across all these different teams. There's only so much like experience around as well. Like if you're drawing experience and whatever talent from other teams, there's only so much you can get without having to get new engineers, new designers, new etc. Which is great, brings more blood into the sport. But in terms of like actually having a fast team and not ending up like an HRT, a Marisha, or a Minardi or whatever, like that's a hard.
The thing is, you need like part of the reason why Red Bull grew so quickly is because Horner convinced Newey, and then having Newey brought in, he did a podcast with Stephen Barnes talking about it, like that
special drivers.
Yeah,
but they also took a team though. They took Jaguar, didn't they? They took Jaguar. Whereas if this is a net new team, like everything starts from scratch. There's no process in place.
But they have said that they're building like a proper factory, like a proper like dedicated space. Now they didn't say directly to Formula One, but just for the Andretti teams in general in IndyCar and stuff. So they're committed, I think, to this. But it's just they're getting a hell of a lot of pushback, and I think that Formula One is like they're a little bit guilty of that at the moment, where they're not doing their utmost to get another team into the sport. Like, what's the best way? They failed with Porsche. I get that. Obviously, Red Bull also partly involved in that as well. Audi are not going to bring their own team. They're going to try and buy into Sauber, if they can. But I think the best mark of the cost cap working, the brand new regs working, is a brand new team coming in, showing that commitment that we want to be in this sport. That's part of the reason
they brought the cost cap in to attract more
talent,
and I'm sure
and it's a bit contradictory with them kind of like pushing back on Andretti.
I think F1 when they thought of bringing in new teams, it would be a marquee like a Porsche or like a BMW or like a Toyota, and not like an Andretti.
There's a bit of like elitism, I think. There's a bit of European elitism.
I agree. I think that's part of it. I think because it's not this big name, like Andretti are huge, don't get me wrong, but like they're not a big manufacturer. I think that's part of why they've been Audi come in, Andretti no.
I think one of the other problems as well, maybe if Red Bull, this is a random theory, so feel free to ignore me. Like maybe because Mercedes has been winning for so long, it's hard for a manufacturer to say I'm going to go join, because you don't want to get beaten by another car manufacturer.
Yeah, you're going to be on the back foot.
Exactly. If it's Red Bull winning for a few years, I'm just guessing maybe it'd be easier to jump in as a manufacturer, because you're like, well, we're racing against teams, we're not racing against manufacturers in the same way. So I don't know, because like Toyota never wanted to be beaten by Ferrari or by like having
for a lot of money as well.
Yeah, exactly. So like,
I think, I mean, there's definitely a lot of public perception in terms of like being beaten by Red Bull is not quite the same. Not in terms of Formula One, because like Formula One, like teams are teams, but outside for the brands, getting beaten by Red Bull, okay, getting beaten by Mercedes for sure. That I think that goes into it. But
I don't know whether I agree with what I just said, by the way.
I think Audi's been in. They've been committed for a long time, like even before Red Bull started winning. But I feel like I've always missed the excitement of new teams and rumors of new teams joining. Like, I've missed that excitement, which is that's what the cost cap was designed to do. And I feel like
it was 24 for a while, wasn't it?
It was,
24 cars.
Back in the day, throwback. But,
exactly, plenty of seats for everyone. But again, even back with those teams, there wasn't that many great drivers. It was just all pretty much like paid drivers, and that's again very slippery slope, and you have to get it right. Andretti themselves have to get it right.
Yeah, well, Hulkenberg. If they don't take him, then
brilliant.
Hulkenberg.
That's a good idea.
He's going to be back. He's going to be back somehow.
He'll find a way to weasel his way back in for sure. Right, okay, we're going to wrap it there. Boys, that was good.
That was fun.
That was an hour, 10 minutes. Flew by.
That's just part one, right? Yeah. Another hour.
We'll be here till tomorrow. What is it? Almost tomorrow. It's 25 past 11.
Yeah. I got work tomorrow.
Good luck. Cheers, boys. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Good chat.
Yeah, it was good.
Always good to chat Formula One, and whether it's good, bad, controversial, or whatever. It's all bop.
No, we'll definitely have you boys back.
It's all content.
Sure. Wherever you're listening on, by the way, make sure you hit the ratings, all the good stuff. Like, you know how to do it.
He's done this before.
This is my second bread and butter. So
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, subscribe,
all of that good stuff.
And if you've got this far, then you're clearly a true
committed,
fan. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you next time. Not with these guys, I'm afraid, but for the Mexico Grand Prix coming up next weekend. See you later. All right, you lot, don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And while you're at it, give us a 5-star rating. Trust me, it really does help us out.